Today we are going to learn basic sewing techniques by making a simple dice bag with boxed corners on the bottom. For this project, some of the items you will need are a sewing machine, scissors, a ruler, pins, maybe an iron, thread to match your fabric, two 8 by 12 inch pieces of fabric, and some string, twine, or small rope to close the bag. First, cut your fabric into two 8 by 12 inch pieces. I'm using a rotary cutter, which is kind of like a pizza cutter that is very sharp. After you cut the fabric, go ahead and iron it to make it easier to work with and get out the wrinkles. Fold the fabric in half long ways with the wrong side facing out. On the side opposite of the fold, make a mark 2 inches from the top. This is a reference line for the lapels that you will add soon. Pin along the edges and leave space for the sewing needle. The space between the seam and the edge is called the seam allowance. We are going to leave a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Fold the top corners tightly at the 2 inch mark to create a lapel. Pin the lapels in place for sewing. Once you have threaded your machine, start with the bottom folded edge and sew right up to the lapel line. The U-turn button that I'm pushing makes the machine go backwards to lock the stitch. Separately, sew the lapels to hold them down. Do this on both pieces of fabric, keeping the wrong side out. Next, we're going to box the corners. This will let the bag stand up on its own. Pop the bag open to flatten the bottom. Make triangle tips with the bottom of the bag. Come down from the tip where you can make a line that's 2 inches long, point to point. Take some chalk or a pencil and draw the 2 inch line. Pin the triangle down, leaving room for the sewing thread. Now sew a seam straight across the chalk line, and you're going to do this for both box corners on both pieces of fabric. After sewing the 2 inch line, cut the tip off of each of the triangles. Leave about 1/4 inch fabric off of the seam. Next, we will attach the two pieces together. Turn one of the pieces right side out and place it inside of the other, leaving the wrong side out. Line up the bags with the right sides facing each other and the wrong side out. Pin the top of the bag to hold the two pieces together and in place. Sew a seam at the top of the bag, leaving a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Do not sew the lapels together just yet. Be careful not to sew the bags together as you rotate around the top. If you do, use a seam ripper to separate them. Turn the bag right side out through the lapel hole and press the seam flat with an iron. The next seam will go from just below the lapels around the top of the bag while leaving 1 inch of seam allowance. This is the area which will hold the drawstring. Make sure not to sew the two sides together. Again, if you do, use a seam ripper, rip the seams, and start over right at the lapels. Now you should have a bag with box corners on the bottom and a seam for holding a string. Next, just run a hard object into the string channel and poke out the other side. Tape the drawstring to the end of the pull tool and pull it through. I use nylon here, and to stop the fraying, I burn the ends. Tie some knots on the end to keep the string from pulling out. Now you have a finished bag.